A longevity pioneer named Bryan Johnson just released his full 2025 daily routine. He claims to be the healthiest person on earth. In this video, I'm going to break down his routine, as well as share some alternatives to the expensive protocols and biohacks he uses. Stick around to the end to understand what you might want to consider adding to your routine and what you should leave alone for him to experiment with. If you don't know who Bryan Johnson is, he's a biohacker and longevity enthusiast and entrepreneur that gained popularity for his $2 million per year longevity routine, as well as open sourcing all of his own biomarkers and the experiments he's running for the greater good of science. Now, let's check out if Bryan really is the healthiest person on planet Earth in 2025.
I asked the most unthinkable and crazy question possible. Are we the first generation that won't die? To explore this question, I hired a team of 30 medical professionals. We measured the biological age of every one of my organs, and then we applied the very best science ever done on health span and lifespan. It's worked. I now have the best biomarkers of anybody in the world. I am the healthiest person on planet Earth. And while the protocol is always changing, this is what I'm doing now. Every day begins for me not when I wake up, but when I go to bed, as sleep is my #1 life priority. I'm asleep by 8:30 p.m. and I naturally wake around 5 a.m., never using an alarm.
All right, a lot to unpack there. First of all, he said that he's the healthiest person on earth based on his biomarkers. And while biomarkers are important to get a diagnostic, they don't represent the sum total of overall health. The human body likely has millions of different biomarkers, the vast majority of which we have no ability to measure and won't for the foreseeable future. The most extreme, hardcore scientific biohackers and longevity enthusiasts likely can't measure more than several hundred. Plus, there's a phenomenon called Goodhart's Law, and it states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Basically, that over-optimizing for any particular biomarker or constellation of biomarkers makes them lose their original function. Now, what he said that I do like is that his day starts in the evening. That is one commonality across a lot of the high performers that I work with, is that they view their evening the night before, including the sleep time, as the start of the block, which is why it's so helpful to plan the next day, in the evening. Although our society rewards waking up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and the early bird gets the worm, that depends a lot on chronotype, your individual constitution, and a lot of other factors. So if you're not waking up at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning, don't beat yourself up. But if you're able to rise without an alarm clock, that's generally a good idea.
The very first thing I do when I wake up is I get 10,000 lux light into my eyes for 3 to 4 minutes. As I'm sitting there, I'll take my inner ear temperature, as my body temperature has dropped 5 degrees Fahrenheit over the past few years, given metabolic efficiencies.
So I had to stop that because there's, again, two things here. First of all, getting 10,000 of lux at 5 in the morning is not natural. There's very few places in the world that the sun will rise that early, and if it's dark outside, you're creating a biological mismatch between the stimulus, the light, your biology. So I know he also does red light therapy as part of his morning routine. I would actually flip these because red and infrared light naturally appear in the visible sunlight spectrum earlier in the morning, and then later in the morning is when there's more UV as you approach solar noon. He mentioned 10,000 lux, and lux is a measure of light intensity. 10,000 has been researched to help with seasonal affective disorder, SAD disorder, and also to improve circadian regulation, but you still don't need to start your day with 10,000 lux at 5 in the morning. But I would still push back that light exposure until a little later in the morning. Next, he mentioned that his body temperature has dropped by a whopping 5 degrees over the last couple of years due to metabolic efficiency. And I'm not sure exactly where he came up with that, because it's well understood that enzymatic rates are optimized in the body at around 98.6 degrees. It's true that your body temperature should be lower in the morning and then progressively rise after breakfast through midday, before it drops back down again in the evening. But the numbers there are a bit different. Unless he was severely hyperthyroid, which I doubt he was, if you test your oral body temperature in the mornings, your temperature in Fahrenheit should be sitting somewhere in the high 97s to low 98s. If your temperature falls in that range, it means your mitochondria, or the energy producers of your cells, are functioning optimally and using active thyroid hormone, T3, and the whole electron transport chain, the ETC, is functioning well. For more on this, you can look into the work of Dr. Broda Barnes. As a side note, if you have high cholesterol, it can also be a sign of hypothyroidism, because your body needs free T3 to convert cholesterol into the protective sex steroid hormones.
Then I'll do a body composition measurement, looking at fat, muscle, hydration, weight, arterial stiffness using a smart scale. I'll then apply a hair serum, massage my scalp for 1 to 2 minutes, and wear a red light hair cap for 6 minutes. I'll do a breathing exercise or meditation for 5 minutes to get my mind and body set for the day.
All right, so he's using what looks like bioimpedance analysis, BIA scale, which essentially sends a small electrical current through your body and then is able to break down different components of body composition. Your lean tissue, your body fat, your extracellular water, and other metrics. It looks like he's using a fairly inexpensive consumer device, possibly a Withings model. That can be fun and interesting, but they're not all that accurate. And for some people, it'll cause obsession over numbers that vary dramatically based on your sleep, what you ate and drank the night before, and other lifestyle factors. You can see dramatic increases or decreases in a lot of those metrics. If you take back-to-back measurements, you'll see differences, which really shows that they're not the most reliable way of measuring weight. So what's more important here would be to track weekly changes rather than daily.
Then I'll consume an 8-ounce drink consisting of Blueprint Longevity Mix, collagen peptides, creatine, and some prebiotics.
Blueprint Longevity Mix is a plant-based protein, and most plant-based proteins have issues with the purity and contaminants, because when you take a crop that's grown, say rice or peas or hemp, there are often issues with contamination, particularly heavy metals. So most plant-based protein powders might do more harm than good because you're taking a huge amount of those crops and you're concentrating them down. I like that his are lab tested, so you know that you're actually getting something pure. I would like to see the amino acid breakdown of exactly what you're getting in his protein still, because it's not the protein, the number of grams that really matter. It's the breakdown of the building blocks of those proteins, the amino acids. And that's one of the reasons that the animal-based protein sources tend to be considered higher quality, because they have higher ratios of what are known as the essential amino acids. You also won't be getting the lactoferrin, potentially the colostrum if the company adds it, bioactive peptides, and other substances in the plant protein that you would be getting in a good pasture-raised clean whey protein. But again, tolerability can vary, and since he's following a vegan diet, it's not compatible. One thing he could do to enhance the quality and bioavailability and the anabolic nature of his protein would be to combine it with digestive enzymes. There's a study I saw that showed that when you combine plant protein with digestive enzymes, you get an anabolic effect, an increase in muscle protein synthesis similar to whey protein. He also uses collagen peptides, which are helpful for a lot of reasons, and especially it's a good idea before resistance training. Bryan also mentioned that he takes prebiotics, not probiotics, but prebiotics, and those are a special kind of fiber that feed the probiotics, the microbes in your gut. If you have a fully optimized gut, depending on what he's taking, that can work great, but for some people, that's gonna only exacerbate issues. And if your gut is in bad shape, you have any overgrowths, you might wanna avoid the prebiotics until you get that under control.
Next, I'll work out for 60 to 90 minutes. I will focus on strength, cardio, flexibility, and balance. While working out, I'll rotate listening to music, books, podcasts. On the weekends, I'll play pickleball, ride a bike, climb, hang out with friends.
60 to 90 minutes in the gym exercising is going to be too much for a lot of people. That's because after about 45 minutes, the amount of cortisol and stress hormones that are produced will overtax the body's ability to recover in a reasonable amount of time. And if your whole stress bucket, your allostatic load isn't in check, this can be a massive source of stress, especially depending on the kind of post-workout nutrition. Instead, a lot of people do well by consolidating their training into a shorter block of, say, 45 to 60 minutes total. And then if they really want to get a second session in, to do another one later in the day. I do like that he includes social movements and activities into his routine because that's one of the overlooked pillars of movement.
Next, for breakfast, I will have Blueprint Longevity Protein and Berry Nut Mix, collagen peptides, extra virgin olive oil, and 100% pure cacao with a few dozen pills. After breakfast, I will squeeze in a few additional therapies. Daily, I do red and near-infrared light therapy, 6 minutes a day. Currently, I have 2 additional therapies. One is...
He doesn't specify here whether he eats the same thing every day or if he rotates it, but if he's taking the same thing every day and he has even a little bit of intestinal permeability, of gut dysbiosis, then that food can leak into his bloodstream and his body can mount an immune response to it, and eventually that can lead to issues with food intolerances, not allergies, but intolerances, which worsen inflammation and other things. So what I do is to rotate what I consume, especially the dietary proteins. If you meal prep, you can just meal prep a couple different things and make sure you're getting a couple of different proteins to have on back-to-back days. The red light's interesting. You can certainly do more than 6 minutes, even if your body is fully exposed. But again, this is where I would flip his light exposure to have that in the morning first thing, and then the 10,000 lux light later, because the red and infrared also help protect against UVA and UVB exposure later in the day.
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and second is focused shockwave therapy, which I'm doing for my entire body, first in world.
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HBOT, is an interesting one. It's being used increasingly to not only handle TBIs and also now as a therapy incorporated in anti-aging routines. It's quite expensive and it has its complications and drawbacks for a lot of people. It's not going to be worth it. If nothing else, you could just do a protocol of about 20 sessions and then take a long break and then another protocol and space it out like that. Focused shockwave therapy is another one that's still emerging. As he mentioned, he's the only one who has the full body treatment like this. Although it's not going to be the same. If you want to replicate some of the effects, you could combine things like pulsed electromagnetic fields, PEMF, and whole body vibration. And that might approximate some of the benefits you get at a tiny fraction of the cost.
Next, I will jump into the shower, wash my face, apply moisturizer and vitamin C, and then 2 to 3 times a week, I will exfoliate with a Japanese washcloth.
Something that's often overlooked in the longevity world is the importance of skincare for not just beauty and aesthetic purposes, obviously, but also for anti-aging reasons, because your skin has a high concentration of senescent zombie cells that are depleting your resources and not contributing and providing. And by taking care of your skin, you're actually reducing some of the senescent cell load and potentially slowing down biological aging. You could also do a minute or 2 of dry brushing before exposing yourself to red and infrared light, because that helps with cellular health and detoxification.
At this point in the morning, I'm feeling pretty good. I've had a fantastic night's sleep. I've fully exercised. I've had a nutritious breakfast. I'm now going to step outside and do a 10-minute walk in the sun. It feels fantastic on my skin. Now I'm mindful of the time I'm out when the UV index is low, where I still get the stimulation and benefits of the sun, but without the damage.
A 10-minute walk is definitely better than none, but he's not going to be getting much of the benefit from a 10-minute walk in the sun because he's wearing full clothing, full sleeves, full pants. It's true that UVA and UVB light enter the retinal ganglion cells to help set circadian rhythm, but really 15, 20, 25 minutes in the early morning when the UV index is low is not going to cause any damage. And the benefits here are certainly going to outweigh the cons. In fact, after building a solar callus, a lot of lighting and hormonal optimization experts recommend 10 to 15 minutes of sun exposure during midday, during solar noon, when the UV index is the absolute highest. Obviously, you don't want to overdo it when it comes to the sun, but 10 minutes in full clothing is not going to provide the full therapeutic benefit.
After this, my work day begins, and it's my favorite part of the entire day because my morning hours are my best hours. I'm open-minded, I'm creative, I'm fast, and so I prioritize the hardest tasks in this window of time. Now in my office, my desk and chair are situated so that I can rotate between sitting and standing, always maintaining proper posture. I find this to be useful because moving about increases blood flow, which increases my alertness.
You've probably heard that sitting is the new smoking, and there's some merit to it. Even with a really intense, hard workout session, if you're sedentary the rest of the day, your body is still going to be degenerating. The simple solution is to sit and stand more, but not just sit and stand more and to move every 30 minutes to an hour, but to actually just change positions beyond that. So that might include things such as working, taking one knee and typing like this. It might be standing, bending your knees. There's a bunch of different ways, like sitting crisscross on the ground with your laptop, perhaps even working in a full squat, or at least just holding a full squat for a minute or so every 45 minutes. Maybe some air squats. These things are important for so many different systems and processes in the body, including blood flow and oxygenation. They also act as like a natural brain-boosting nootropic. They help with fascial health and posture in reducing forward head posture. Plus, you just feel better and more limber after work if you're not sitting in the same position for 8 hours straight.
After the first few hours of the day of hard focus, I will have my next meal of the day, typically something like Super Veggie, which is a mixture of lentils, broccoli, cauliflower, mushrooms, hemp seeds, garlic, and ginger. Immediately following eating Super Veggie, I will jump back into focused work. Every 30 minutes, I'll do roughly 5 minutes of light activities, such as walking or bodyweight exercises, stretching. I find that it makes me more flexible of mind and of body.
All right, well, 5 minutes of movement every 30 minutes is simply not going to be feasible for most people. So you can certainly modify this, and every 45 minutes, every 50 minutes, do 1 minute or even 30 seconds of movement or shifting positions or something to stay remotely active. Personally, if I was to do 5 minutes of movement every 30 minutes, I would not be able to stay in the flow state and get much done.
An hour and a half or 2 hours later, I will have my final meal of the day, which will be some combination of veggies, nuts, seeds, and berries. For example, I might have a stuffed sweet potato with avocado, tomatoes, chickpeas with a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. My daily caloric intake is 2,250 calories, which is made up of 25% protein, 35% carbs, and 40% fat. Note that I am plant-based by choice, excluding the collagen peptides. After my final meal of the day, I will get back into work, and as I did before, every 30 minutes or so, I will do 5 minutes of light activity, which helps with blood flow, awaken my mind, and keep my body loose and flexible.
All right, so his macros break down to about 140 grams of protein, 197 grams of carbohydrates, and 100 grams of fat. Obviously, he's not low carb, he's not low fat, he's just eating a semi-macronutrient balanced diet, devoid of all processed foods. One thing that might get overlooked when people are watching his video is that he was mentioning drinking electrolytes and mineralized drinks throughout the day. If you've watched this channel, you know that minerals are one of the unsung heroes of health and wellness, and especially supplementation. That's a huge part of his routine, and if you're not consuming minerals, you might want to look into it.
The liquid I drink throughout the day is mineralized, either via tea or electrolytes. I will stop drinking liquids around 4 p.m. to avoid getting up at night to go to the bathroom. The rest of my day is filled with endless activities. What a lot of people don't realize is I am currently the operating CEO of several endeavors, including Blueprint, Don't Die, my longevity protocol is a full-time job, I am a content creator, and I am a father. My favorite part of what I do, no day is ever the same.
All right, well, he just said that no food or liquids after 4 p.m. and he wakes up at 5 p.m. So that right there is at least a 12 or 13 hour, possibly more, hour dry fast. And I don't think he's realized that he's dry fasting, but there is tremendous power in dry fasting. And I actually wrote an article on this because it's another powerful therapeutic that's very different, night and day different than water fasting. That one little tweak makes a huge difference. Dry fasting is when you don't consume food or water. There's an excellent book on it called The Phoenix Protocol by Dr. August Dunning, and in it he catalogs the clinical experiences of 4 Russian doctors that used it successfully for all kinds of different conditions and ailments. So Bryan Johnson is a dry fasting advocate without even realizing it, as he's currently doing intermittent dry fasting.
Now, as the end of day arrives, I have been working non-stop the entire day. I need to wind down. This process commences with me taking a 10-minute walk outside. I'll spend time with friends and family, and then I'll do something like read a book, meditate, do breath work, something to calm my body down. I'll turn screens off. I'll try to stop messaging or view social media. Nighttime mode is activated. Now, I know from achieving the best sleep score in human history, 8 months of perfect sleep, that the single strongest predictor of my nighttime sleep quality is my resting heart rate.
First, when it comes to optimizing environment, a lot of people talk about the color spectrum, the blue lights, as being evil and the biggest disruptor of melatonin production and sleep, but it's actually a little more complicated than that. As the ancient science of Ayurveda knew 5,000 years ago, it's not just the color of the light, but it's where it is. If you have lights that are way up here, overhead lights, that's gonna disrupt your sleep more than lights that are on the ground. And of course, it's not just the color spectrum, but also the intensity, the brightness of the light. And newer research also confirms what Ayurveda knew in their practice of Agnihotra, which is that the contrast of the light against the background, the orange or red against the blue, is another variable to consider when it comes to the sleep impacting effects of light. Regarding the self-quantification metrics, it's great to see that he's doing well and he has a 100 sleep score. Sleep is finally getting some of the recognition it deserves, but don't beat yourself up if you're not getting a 100 sleep score. I have multiple wearable devices and my Oura Ring consistently rates me about 30 points lower than the 8 sleep, which is the one that he uses. So I can get a 100-point score on my 8 sleep, a 70 on my Oura Ring, and about an 85 on my Ultra Human Ring. So that tremendous variability in the aggregate score of your sleep quality isn't everything, but what he says next, in my opinion, is much more important.
Everything I do is to lower the beats per minute of my heart. The lower I go, the better my sleep.
That right there is gold. There's a lot of talk about heart rate variability, HRV for short, and to me, those are the two most important metrics that whenever I check my sleep scores, I care about those two metrics the most. Heart rate variability measures the delta, the difference in time between each successive heartbeat, which reflects the degree of balance, stress, and relaxation of your autonomic nervous system. And your resting heart rate is exactly what it sounds. Your heart rate when you're at complete rest, and your lowest resting heart rate also tells you a ton about the state of your nervous system and your lifestyle habits and routines, and is a great barometer of overall health. Although if you focus exclusively on that, you're going to over-optimize for endurance training, because extreme endurance athletes tend to have the lowest resting heart rates, even though a lot of them have issues with their heart and calcium deposits in their heart. So what's more important here is to notice your own bio-individual trend and to work on gradually improving it and noticing the factors that increase your resting heart rate, taking note of those and tweaking them, and then the things that bring your resting heart rate down and doing more of those.
At 8:30, my head will hit the pillow and I will be asleep within 1 to 3 minutes. On any given night, I will average over 2 hours of REM, 2 hours of deep, and I will be up less than 30 minutes a night. These are the markers of exceptional sleep.
Falling asleep's great and it feels good, but according to the sleep experts, including companies that measure sleep, such as Oura Ring, if you fall asleep within 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, they actually mark you down on your score, because falling asleep that quickly is often a sign that your body is overtaxed and needs extra recovery. So the sweet spot is to fall asleep within about 5 minutes of your head hitting the pillow.
And then my favorite part of the entire thing, I know I get to do the same thing tomorrow. Life is amazing.
Well, there was a lot to unpack in Bryan Johnson's 2025 daily routine. If you're looking to start your longevity journey and are overwhelmed by all the information out there, I've got you covered. Join my 14-day longevity challenge, where I strip away all the fluff and give you just the actionable strategies that work to improve your health and slow your biological aging. check it out in the description below. And make sure to stop by Outliyr.com for your bioharmonizing and longevity resources. There are some really smart people in this community, so go ahead and drop a comment below and share what you think of his routine and what you would do differently if you were Bryan Johnson's longevity doctor. Thanks for watching. Until next time, be an outlier.